Hey, it's Michael. If you've been on a Zoom with me lately, you'll notice that you have my full attention. It's because I'm not taking notes. Instead, I rely on Fellow, an AI meeting assistant, to take notes for me, along with tracking action items and decisions, handling recordings, transcripts, and summaries all in one secure platform. It's kind of like magic. Built with security and privacy at its core, Fellow is the only AI meeting assistant that thousands of leaders and organizations trust to capture meeting notes and recordings while keeping your data safe. They're so confident that you'll love it, they're offering an insane deal to you all, Between Two COOs listeners. 90 days of unlimited AI-powered note-taking and recording completely free. Visit fellow.app/COO to sign up today and experience the AI meeting assistant trusted by leaders everywhere. Does this sound familiar? You wake up, you take a look at your calendar, and you see it's filled with meetings. Project meetings, stand-ups, weekly check-ins, one-on-ones, town halls, and those are just the internal ones. Some of our meetings are complete and total waste of time and treasure. I mean, be honest with yourself. How many times have you thought this meeting could have totally been an email? I bet a bunch. Now consider that in the US, there are 55 million meetings that happen each day, and 85 to 90% of them have no agenda. That's a lot of wasted time. And one of the reasons why a while back, Shopify canceled all of their recurring meetings, saving them 322,000 hours over a 2-week period. Well, there's a SaaS out there that is completely dedicated to making products that optimize structured management processes, like optimizing meetings, agendas, formats, action items, notes, and even calculating the cost of the meeting based on the attendee's pay. It's called Fellow, and today on Between Two COOs, we're going to do one of the things that I love and bring on the people behind the companies whose products I use every day. Our guest is the founder and CEO of Fellow, Aidan Mizrahi, and we're going to talk about optimizing our own time, our team's time, management, building successful companies, you name it. Aydin, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to do this.
Let's get started. Meetings, Fellow. How did this start? Why did you choose this as the problem to solve?
Yeah, it's interesting. It is a little bit of a longer story, but to shorten it, my last company, we started this company. It was in the online service space, bootstrapped it, sold it to SurveyMonkey. We were this scrappy company, just around 100 people. And getting acquired into SurveyMonkey was a very interesting process for us because we got exposed to all of these, call it like structured management processes. You'd be surprised, but I had never done a one-on-one meeting in my entire life. I didn't even know what that was or why you should do such things. No quarterly business reviews, no staff meetings. It was just like a very scrappy, everyone all over the place startup. And yeah, we get acquired in and are part of the process of growth and until IPO and everything else. And we just got exposed to all these management constructs. And so the first iteration of Fellow for us was, what if we built a manager's co-pilot? What if we built something that would teach the knowing entrepreneur how to run a business and how to scale a business? And so that was like the original vision. But then as we got deep into what a manager's co-pilot is, what we realized is that managers spend half of their time in meetings, and it's a drain, and nobody shows off about that. It's like one of those things that you don't want to admit and you don't necessarily feel good about, but it was just such a large portion of time. Managers have many tools in their toolkits, but a lot of managing is done through meetings and human interactions. And what ended up happening was a lot of our focus just ended up being on meetings. And at some point we said, this is a large enough global problem. If we don't solve this, we're worried that it might never be solved. So we might as well dive right in and see if we can tackle the meeting problem.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack there. First off, you had the company and you ran it. You didn't have any of those normal management processes, one-on-one, things of that nature. But it was successful. You exited. Tell me about it. It was successful. You didn't have those usual things that you experienced. How did that happen?
So there are a lot of things and you notice this in business too, right? Sometimes you see a successful company do something and then you would say, oh, they're doing it, it must be a good thing to do, right? But sometimes you're successful in spite of those things. I think this was definitely one of those cases. I think it was a lot of, we just weren't exposed to ways of scaling companies and creating the right processes in place. So yes, we were there, but we were successful, but not because of that. And the truth was that had we scaled a little bit more than that, we would have been in big trouble. Like, I think we were definitely bursting at the seams and disaster waiting to happen, but we made it work. Everything was, I would say, duct taped together and relied a lot on the founders basically holding things together, and some structure and some process would have gone a long way.
So when you joined SurveyMonkey, you had all of these new structures, all these new processes. The first question is, did it improve the business? And the second is, how'd you learn it all? How long did it take?
I think with a lot of these processes, a lot of them are frameworks that people have discovered over the course of time that you should do, right? So when you think about a one-on-one meeting, what is that, right? So to some extent, it's at the highest level, it's an alignment meeting, right? Like it's many things, but at the highest level, it's an alignment meeting to make sure that your manager and direct report, leader and team member, that they're aligned on the outcomes that need to be achieved. At another level, it's a feedback meeting. So it's how are we doing? How can I help you? There are other elements too, like there's an element of career coaching, there's an element of support and unblocking and many other things that go into it. And when you think of the individual elements that happen there, at some point you think, hey, these are really useful things to happen. And if I'm the CEO or a COO of a company especially, I'm thinking, I really want these things to happen. How do I make sure that they happen at scale? So then I might say, for my company, I want to create a process where every manager does these sorts of things. And I want to go a level above that. And I want to make sure that not only do they have that time in their calendar, but also that they talk about a certain type of thing. So I'm going to go so far as to train people or create like a default template that they can use to make sure that those things happen. So now we're just talking about a one-on-one meeting. Now let's take another concept, say like the quarterly business review. So quarterly business review also, there's a lot of benefits to it. At the highest level, it's probably about reviewing what happened. It's the military after action review, right? But on a quarterly basis. But it also has other purposes. It's the ability for executives to see the rising stars. There's probably opportunities for cross-functional understanding of what teams are focused on. And these are generally good things to have. So then now you start to say, we should do this on a quarterly basis. And every time you run this process, it is a meeting, but it's effectively a process that needs to happen because a lot feeds into it. You're doing all this prep, you're doing all this work, and you're like, okay, this is another process. And you have a template for that. And the template improves over the course of time because you learn things. You're like, when we do the QBR this way, when people prep in this format, it turns out to be better. When the questions are like this, it's better. And you keep improving this process. And if you take a step back, meetings to some extent, especially recurring meetings, are effectively processes that are put into place that force a series of actions, discussions that are in general very beneficial. We can talk about retrospective meetings. We can talk about discovery meetings for salespeople. Every kind of interaction in this way is effectively like a process. And I'll go even a step further outside of this, which is like in our society and humanity. These are some of my viewpoints. But for example, if we were designing a society, we might say it's really good, like when you're thankful, that's actually really good and it's a good part of society. And we should once a year make sure that everybody's thankful. And so you insert like a holiday for that. We should celebrate our presidents or we should celebrate our veterans, right? And so you start to build these things into society. And they're effectively, again, the calendar is a very powerful thing because it can ensure that certain things happen on a certain cadence. And so as I started to be exposed to these things and really just think about companies as just a series of systems and processes, it started to make sense why these things can be very powerful. And it was just like that systematic viewpoint that led me to believe, hey, there must be a way that we can allow people to very easily build these systems into their companies, start with the best templates, and just give them the tools to make each and every one of those things effective, but also not do them blindly, right? It's not about just saying, I'm doing one-on-ones because I have to, but like really understanding what the purpose is of what you're doing and how you should do it and what the best practices are.
You mentioned that there are different processes for different meetings. I love how you equated national holidays to societal processes. Now, how do you go about implementing one-on-ones at scale? And the reason I ask this is early on you mentioned Fellow as a co-pilot for founders that haven't necessarily had exposure to these processes, right? So there's a product that's built there. What about with the Shopify, who I believe is a customer, isn't it?
Yeah. Shopify has been a customer for, I think, more than 4 years now, and they use it all across the company.
And it just continuously scales. And do they do improvements? You talked about different processes for different meetings, right? You have a different process for a QBR. You have a different process for these one-on-ones. These are feedback loops that you're getting from your customers about how to make the product better. Is that something that you all are harvesting, learning, etc.?
Yeah, so I think the learnings materialize themselves in the form of templates. So there are there's a bunch of things that we do, but one of which is we take expert templates and curate them from our customers and make them available within the product just to give people a sense to do those sorts of things. Say there's like a famous CEO or a famous COO that you admire. Wouldn't it be cool to be able to know what their staff meeting looks like? Because I think this is a thing that all leaders struggle. Most people that I ask, I'm like, tell me about your staff meeting. And then their first thing is, I don't know that we do it the best, but this is what we do, reluctantly telling you about it, right? Everybody's looking to learn. And the truth of the matter is that all of these things have to be evolving over the course of time, because what matters is who's in the meeting. What's going on in the business? What's going on? Is this wartime or is this peacetime? Right? And so all of these things dictate a different set of things that should be discussed. But what is important is that once you figure out best practices, like the places where a lot of this stuff is very familiar is, for example, for sales, right? In sales, there's a lot of typical things that happen, right? You have discovery meetings and follow-ups, and there's a cadence, and you build a pipeline. But this kind of process also can exist for many other things. For example, customer success folks can have different series of conversations, or implementation specialists or onboarding teams can have like different types of meetings that they do with their customers. And so the thing is that when you have any one of these processes, then what you want to do is you want to build in the tools. So when you hire new people, everybody follows the same agenda, same structured process for running those types of meetings. And so it's different. So from the individual level, you just want to run an effective meeting. You use a product, you use Fellow to be able to do that. This one time I remember talking to a VP at Shopify, and I said, so why do you like Fellow so much? And they said that for me, I'm a user and I like it as a user, but for me, it gives me the confidence that I know across my team, across my organization, that everybody is doing it and everybody's doing it in the same way. And so there's a lot of power that comes from like knowing that these things happen, because I think the reality is that if you stop any leader, and again, we're just going to pick on the one-on-one meeting, but if you say, hey, do you guys do one-on-ones? They're going to say, yeah, I think so. Everybody does it differently. I don't know how effective they are. But again, when you think about the importance of, say, managers within your companies, we like to think of them as the highest leverage point within organizations. Like, you want to create organizational change. Like, how do you do that? It's largely through your managers. When people grow, it's thanks to partially the help of the managers. When people leave companies, they leave the manager, not the company. And so the pivotal meeting or interaction that happens is, for example, through these one-on-ones. And so it's just, these sorts of concepts make it that when we think about operations, typically we think about customer requests come in and we do these things with it, or an order comes in and this is how we handle it. But we don't think about like the standard interactions that happen across our companies. And there's a lot of examples like this. Let's talk about, if you're okay with it, Michael, to talk about communications are like really hard, specifically from exec level and down. Take any message and you want everybody to understand and internalize that. It's not a simple thing, right? It has to be mentioned 9 different times across all the channels. And then still you'll have people who say, oh, how come nobody told me, right? And so there's a lot of things. So one of the things, for example, that we thought very purposefully about is, again, like thinking about the one-on-one meeting, how powerful would it be if you could get every single person, every manager in your organization to talk about a specific topic during their next one-on-one. So we have these like corporate, like basically from an organizational leader can say, this week I want everybody to talk about this topic and I want it to bubble up and get back to me. And you can like insert these topics or these suggested topics in the conversations or the agendas that people are going to have. So again, this is what we think about at scale, but obviously like on the end user level, it's just about building a delightful experience that's going to help you very practically run a better meeting. But on the organizational level, it's just like a different set of things that you care about and think about.
There are many things about meetings that drive me crazy. One of them is the cascading messaging that you just described. Something will be decided and then it gets siloed, it gets dropped, certain people forget about it. So having that different type of reminder, super valuable. Tell me about how you go about making sure that meetings are actionable, that you don't just have a great conversation and then it's done, right? There are action items that really need to happen. Otherwise, it's a complete waste of time.
Yeah. So I think that this comes at a lot of different levels. It's starting from making sure that a meeting has a purpose. And again, like technology has changed what a meeting needs to be. It used to be you need to actually bring people together to hear something, right? Technology has really changed that. So concepts like if you're still having status reports, and again, we're not even talking about the individual level, right? This is about organizations. So you have to think about within my company, within my organization, how many people are still doing meetings where it's about status updates, right? Like you think about creating more efficiency and more bandwidth in your company to get things done. That's probably 15% of all the meetings that happen. The content of all meetings that happen across organizations everywhere is just that. So there's a hack, 15% cut out of all of your meetings everywhere. But the thing is, if you have the right purpose, and the purpose is usually to get to an outcome, as long as that's defined, then it's about taking that outcome and then detailing the way that it's going to get done and indicating what the next steps are. The way that at least we structure it inside of Fellow is that there's a structured agenda and then there's a very purposeful place for action items. And it just prompts you that as things are recorded, that you can basically have those action items there. And so now we're doing some fun things with AI that will suggest action items and do that kind of stuff as well. But the other point is the accountability factor. I think one of the things that we hear very often is that we talk about all these things, people agree to do them, but then they don't happen or things slip through the cracks. So I think like the other really important thing is to, once an action item is determined, that it is something that is constantly brought up in the subsequent meetings or subsequent series of conversations. Because if it's not, you're saying that it's okay for things that we agreed on not to be actioned on. So I think the other part of that is to make sure that recurrence is there. So there's a lot of stuff like when we think about the flows of how we build software is to make sure that when an action item is indicated, that there's all the proper reminder flows, but the opportunities for you to be able to discuss those in subsequent meetings, that those things are carried forward automatically, for example. So those are some other things that we think about. But we also measure it, right? So things that are interesting, again, like I always put on the organizational hat as well, which is what percentage of meetings that happen at our companies come out with action items? And is that And where are the culprits? Like, where are the meetings that are happening that don't have any actions coming out of them? And that's a valuable thing to know, because we reference Shopify, for example, and canceling meetings. We can discuss that topic too. But it's just, again, when you're an operational leader, we're talking about 15 to 20% of your entire payroll being spent on people going to meetings. And so again, like when you spend that much time doing anything, what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's done well. And just because meetings can be valuable doesn't mean that you need to spend all of your time in meetings, right? And so you really have to think purposefully about it. And then those sorts of analytics are very valuable. Like, what percentage of meetings come out with action items? What percentage are prepared for in advance? What percentage start late? What percentage are more than 1 hour that don't need to be, right? There's just all these different things that are just very helpful in order to like just build a hyper efficient functioning company.
It's tough to look at your calendar and just see a block of meetings, because when do you get things done? So how do we think about that? How do you all think about, as the meeting experts, not just having an entire day of meetings?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. So one is that we have to come up with norms around what is acceptable in terms of the number of hours of meetings that you should have in a week, right? Nobody's ever talked about this. So what is the hour? Like, would you know? Like, if I were to ask you, actually, let's play this game. What is an acceptable number of hours of meetings per week?
Oh my gosh. I think it depends. Right? That's the best answer. No, it depends on the level, on who you are, what your responsibilities are, what's going on in the company, right? But, oh gosh, for operations folks and executives, meetings are the death blow, right? So I don't even know.
Yeah. And so this is again, like for execs, like this is very, very common to hear. The way that we think about it is, when you said it depends, that's exactly the right answer. It does depend on the role. So again, if you talk to a sales leader, they'll say, I want my sales reps in meetings, I want all 40 hours. If I can do that and I can pull that off, then that's what I would do. But again, so it does depend on the role. But one of the things that we think about is that we need to come out with a number and educate people about that. So one of the things that we've thought about is, for example, for individual contributors, that the number should be 7.5 hours or less. So in other words, like if it's more than 7.5 hours on a per week basis, then that is too much. For managers and directors, our number is 15 hours. So it shouldn't be more than 15 hours. And the way that we've come up with these benchmarks is, as you can imagine, we just have a lot of meeting data. And so when we look at it, we also look at types of companies, but we also look at what does the top 10% best quartile look like, and what do the averages look like. And so these are the numbers that we look at. Now, here's a very powerful thing. So what do most companies do? Most companies think, okay, that's a good idea, Aydin. We should have those numbers, but then what do we do with that? Most companies will just put it in a wiki somewhere, and great, first step. But we all know that doesn't work, right? The way that we like to do it is we enforce these things through this thing that we've built called meeting guidelines. It's built into your calendar. If I'm going to invite you, Michael, into a meeting, I will get told at the time that I'm committing the act of inviting you to that meeting that you already surpassed the maximum threshold of meetings that we want you to have. Now, I could still do it, but I've been warned. And then we make it very explicit, where it's like, violate on purpose, showing you the red button. And so there's a lot of, respect that comes with that. But the way that we think about it is, it's just like an educational process. So this is one thing, which is like, how much is too much? The other thing that we like to think about, and this is really hard to implement, but I think, again, now with AI tools, and of course, a lot of stuff that we're building, but things that are starting to become accessible, this is starting to change. But everybody knows that meeting, especially if we're talking about, okay, say your company is 1,000, 2,000 people. This is not an uncommon occurrence, where you'll come in and you'll say, hey, there's this meeting. There's 63 people in it. And out of the 63 people, only 4 people ever talk. And every now and then, someone will say something from the other cohort. And so the way that we think about it is, who need to be the active participants? And so in other words, if you're not going to be speaking during the meeting, And the way that, again, we like to think about it is that if you're not at least speaking or you're not an active participant for at least 5% of that meeting, and I know that sounds like a low bar, but there are many meetings where people don't even take up 5% of the talk time. And if you're not going to do that, then that's not a meeting that you should actively be involved in or participate in. So in other words, we have like meeting participants, and then we have these meeting attendees. And we don't want you to be an attendee. We want you to be a participant. And if you're not going to be a participant, again, what you should do is record that meeting. You should summarize it and then send it to the relevant parties. And then if people want to comment on the recording, they can do that after the fact. And then the original parties can consume that information. But again, it allows you to be able to listen to things at 2x speed, right? Consume it at your own time. Maybe go for a walk and do something healthy while you consume the content, right? It just gives people that opportunity. I know you're a big fan of remote work and hybrid. And so again, like it allows for this. And then there's another thing. There's all sorts of, again, I can list these things off from now until forever, but I'll put one more in there. So with every meeting that has more than 7 attendees, the ability to get to a decision actually drastically reduces to the point where when you're, I think, around 14 attendees, the ability to get to a decision goes to near zero. And so when you think about that, it's just, once you have that threshold, it's okay, everybody, we should really not have meetings with more than 7 people, and then educating those people, right? So the next time you're about to add that 8th attendee, we have these calendar prompts that are like, hey, how about you invite fellow bot instead, and just make them optional so that they don't actually have to go. But it's just like teaching people. It's just because those norms don't exist, and everybody comes from a different company, and they bring their own norms and practices. Nobody ever goes out and says, hey, at our company, we want to avoid things with more than 7 people. And this is how we run meetings at, say, 2 Cows, as an example. Unless we define our culture, we define our values, we need to define our meeting culture. We need to define how we run meetings within any organization and agree upon them, and then constantly encourage and enforce those types of guidelines.
No, for sure.
You can tell I'm very passionate about this stuff after being in it for,
because there's
the
a connotation
number of years
with
I have.
That it's like, oh, it's so inefficient, right? Oh, I have to attend this meeting now. And there's that connotation because why, right? There's a history of meetings sucking, right? I think I see people with coffee mugs, meetings suck. And so the way that you've all approached this is one of the reasons why we use Fellow at 2 Cows, why we love it.
Oh, I should tell you about this other thing that we do, which is a little controversial. This is very advanced. So I don't know that most companies would do what we do, but but you could do it. You could do it using Fellow, and some companies do. We have a setting that will automatically cancel meetings all across your company if they don't have an agenda. Now you can specify, you can say 1 hour before, and 1 hour before is at least, come on, it needs to be there 1 hour before at the very least. And so it'll just auto cancel it. And so the first time you enable this across your company, what I promise you will happen is a lot of people will get very angry, and they'll say, hey, it disappeared from my calendar, this thing was happening. But if you want to change behavior change, as a COO, behavior change is the hardest thing that exists, right? To get people that have been doing things a certain way to do things differently. And sometimes a shocking event like that is necessary. And maybe one time they miss it, second time they miss it, third time it won't happen. They're going to be in there. There's going to be a very specific agenda, and people are going to make sure that, and the motto we like to use, which is fun because it's viral, you say it once, and it's sometimes like people just need the words, because once you have the words, you can just communicate them and everybody can understand them. So our motto is no agenda, no attenda. Again, once you hear it now, but then it gives you the words, right? Hey, the next time you invite to a meeting and there's no structured agenda, it's about no attenda. Everybody knows that. It's part of our culture.
Gosh, you must be friends with Darren Murph, who was a previous guest, who shared no agenda, no attenda as well. So this really needs to catch on. So every single listener, ready? No agenda, no attenda, no agenda, no attenda. That's actually difficult to say 10 times fast. Anyways, look, let's talk about your podcast.
By the way, Darren is great. Huge fan of Darren's.
Oh, yeah. He's the man. I remarked I've been working remote, as you said, since 2007, 2008. And you start to think, I know most things about remote work. And then when you talk to Darren, you're just like, wow, I really don't know much about remote work. And here's this guy. So let's talk about remote and let's talk about meetings. What, as the meeting experts, what do you see as being different for successful meetings? Is there a difference between remote and in person?
Yeah, so I think remote gives you a lot of opportunity. There's this term that we use called the asynchronous meeting, and it's, maybe you think that's an oxymoron, but it's, some things need to be done synchronously. So we do believe one-on-one meetings, because part of it is about rapport building, part of it is about getting to know people as humans. Some things should be done synchronously for sure. But there are a lot of things that don't need to be synchronous. And I'll give you a very basic example. We have this one meeting. I'll give you two different examples. One where, again, like you talk about, you think you know a lot about remote work, but then you learn more about it over the course of time. Do you know Tony James from Oyster?
Not personally, but I love hearing him speak.
Yeah, so it's chatting with him. And he was telling me about their exec meetings. And they do a really interesting thing, which is before the meeting, there is an entire recording, like a Loom or a Vidyard video. And you have this recording, and every exec does it. So everybody gives like their few-minute update. And it was very interesting. I asked him, why a video? Why does it have to be a video? Can't it just be text? And he said, listen, we're remote, and sometimes it's not about the bullet points, but it's about the tone. It's about your facial expressions while you're saying the thing. And when I'm reading text, it's hard to weight things, right? But when you're speaking it, I can apply appropriate weighting to, that's actually, I should pay attention to that. So everybody does that. So this all happens before the meeting. And when you come into the meeting, you already have all the context, and you really only talk about the things that need to be discussed. And so this is what we like to call a hybrid meeting. And so we do the same thing at Fellow for our exec meeting or a staff meeting. And this is hybrid because part of it is done on a remote basis. You can consume the information in advance, and then only part of the meeting is actually synchronous that involves discussion. And so the beauty of this is how you reduce the synchronous time required within your company. And Amazon talks about their 6-page memos that come in. But there's this notion of a lot of work should be done in advance of the meeting. And when you do things like that, it makes it really powerful because a lot of people take time to process things. So I'm definitely like that. You give me information right now and then ask me to discuss it. I can do it, but it'll be surface level. You give me one night of sleep between when I consume the information, I'm going to come in with ideas that you would have never imagined, right? And so that's why this is better. And I think like when you think about it that way, asynchronous or hybrid meetings are actually a lot more powerful. They have the potential to even give you better results. Another example that we have is we had this situation where we had like an SEO search engine issue that we were trying to deal with. And so that started as, again, like a very important event. So we started it on a synchronous basis. So it was once a week synchronous. And then we morphed it into once every 2 weeks. And now it's an asynchronous meeting. And so what that means is it's on our calendar. So we just know that what that means is like prior to the meeting, we click on the meeting and we interact with it in Fellow, and everybody's doing the things. And then that just becomes a thing that doesn't need to be synchronous. Everybody's just the reports are there, people can comment on it, and then we can move on. But the reason why it's nice for it to be in the calendar is, again, it just programmatically lets you know that this is something that needs to be actioned and there's a time associated with it. Like when we think, again, about a structured process, in brackets, it says async for the meeting title. So you know that this is not something that I need to jump into. I just need to do things before the end time of this meeting, and it becomes a structured task that needs to happen. So that's what I think about asynchronous meetings. I think over the course of time, most work will become asynchronous because it's just more efficient and just better to be able to do that. But again, the way that you do that is you just have to be purposeful about it and really think about what things need to be synchronous or not. The other thing I learned about when it comes to synchronous versus asynchronous is the advantage of asynchronous is just the micro prioritization concepts, right? So some people wake up and they're morning people. Some people are evening people. Some people are afternoon people. And do you know Dan Martell?
Again, not personally, but
yeah. So Dan has this really cool thing, which is everybody says, okay, my time, come up with a large number for your time. Say my time is worth $1,000 an hour, 10,000, 100,000, doesn't matter. So some large numbers so that you can really think about your time purposefully. And so the point is that, say that we choose an arbitrary number, $1,000 an hour. So the problem is that $1,000 an hour is not equally weighted. Maybe between 9 a.m. and 12 a.m., so 12 p.m., that's $10,000 time, because that's like my brain is wired, like I can do my best possible work. Whereas, at 6 p.m., that's $50 an hour. Like I'm just, not really, like I'm already drained, and so on and so forth. And again, asynchronous allows for you to be able to use the best tasks at the best times. But if a lot of your meetings are synchronous and they don't have hybrid components, then you're injecting them potentially in the wrong place. And again, if we're just thinking about an optimization flow of like, how do we optimize everyone's time? Again, this is another reason why it can be a big driver of success.
Yeah, of course you're preaching to the choir, right? The people listening to this
of course.
are just, everyone is just like, yep, oh, this is so cool. And I want a like behind the scenes peek, I think we all do, at the operations and processes at Fellow, because you all are the masters of this. And it all ties into one of the things that I like to say, which is just tech companies are people, processes, and servers, right? You got to have the right people, but without the right processes, oh boy, that's not going to be great. This is why I love it. Now, you distinguished a couple of different components of a meeting. I love the asynchronous meetings for, it sounds like FYIs, right? Here's what's going on. Here are the announcements that you need to know. It's not really a discussion, but hit me up if you have any questions, right? Then there are the discussion meetings, and then there's the decisions. Am I thinking about this correctly? Are there different ways that we should think about this?
Definitely. So one of the things that we like to think about is, again, being very purposeful about these types of meetings. One of the things that we've learned, for example, over the course of time, is it's very hard to do a creative session and do a session at the same time arrive to a decision in the same context. Because what ends up happening is arriving to a decision it's almost like a different part of your brain than the creative, let's explore possibilities. And so when there's a time crunch and you're trying to do both things at the same time, some people are trying to be creative and explore, and other people are like, let's get back on track. So one of the things that we've learned is, again, if you're very purposeful about it, like you could have a brainstorming session, which is about, let's come up with ideas, creative solutions to this problem. But we're not going to decide. We're going to be very specific that we're not going to decide. Then, a week from now, when we get together, we will have considered all the different options brought together, and then we're going to focus this meeting on actually a decision that has arrived. So this is one kind of like just tactical thing that has been helpful. The other thing is, again, there's many different frameworks. There's the RASI framework. There's different ones, but what a lot of them have in common is just having specific roles around what people are going to make a decision, who's informed, who's participating. And so as long as you explicitly define who the decision maker is for a particular meeting, this also takes another part and makes it a lot easier for people to have a more productive discussion.
One of the things previously you had spoken about, if you're speaking 5% of the time or less, right? That's an appropriate.
It's a low bar too, by the way.
Right. Low bar to be a participant versus an attendee. I actually use Crisp.ai. Originally, I started using it for background noise cleanup, things of that nature. Of course, Google Meet and Zoom have gotten really good at filtering that stuff out. One of the features that keeps me around, though, is it tells me what percentage of the time I speak. And so as a leader, it's our job to maybe do more listening than speaking, right? Let me ask you a question. again, being the expert on meetings, what's your favorite meeting? What's the most important meeting? If you were going to have one meeting a day or one meeting a week, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the most impactful meeting, and so we think about these things in terms of the cost of the meeting, right? And so cost of meeting, simple concept, people's salaries times time that they're in. So for every company, the most expensive one is their version of the town hall or the all staff or whatever that meeting is. And so you think about it, and whenever you spend a lot of resources of the company, the most expensive meeting in any company is in fact that. I think the thing that most people, not every company does, is like they don't spend the proportionate amount of time of making use of that to the fullest effect, right? So I think this is another opportunity where to get the entire company aligned, but also get them pumped and excited about, the week ahead. And so I think for me, that's my most favorite meeting, just because it is like the opportunity, it has the opportunity to be the highest impact part of the company. And I think, again, as a CEO, part of my job is to be the chief cheerleader and be able to tell the story and get people pumped about the future. And so this is my opportunity to do that at a large scale. And I just think about it that way, and why that's my favorite meeting.
You mentioned AI earlier. There's so many applications happening right now. It's so easy to go down, any number of rabbit holes. How are you all thinking about using AI to be more efficient?
Yeah, we all know, again, like you said, preaching to the choir, I'm sure everybody knows super transformative, can change every business ever. Everybody should be scared shitless is the real answer, because every business is up for disruption, I think. Like the only business that, there's like maybe some that are not. I was joking with a friend that there's this park close-ish, like within an hour drive where we live, where you can take your kids and they can see real animals, and like we should buy this thing because this is maybe the only place that isn't going to be disrupted by AI, right? But yeah, that's really happening all across the board. And yeah, there's a couple of things. Again, I think about processes, and I think about like systematic ways of making your company AI centric and AI forward. We did a bunch of things. One of which was when we have two times a year, we get everybody, again, as a remote first company, 2 times a year, we get together and do an employee summit and bring everybody together. And what we like to do during those employee summits is we do them as 3-day events. And so day one is summit. So lots of internal talks, maybe bring some customers. And then the other 2 days are actually a hackathon. And we do in-person hackathons because it's really cool to just let everybody go in and interact, and like salespeople can interact with developers and CS people can interact with marketers, and everybody participates in our hackathons. It's not just developers, because everybody can build processes and do something that they normally wouldn't do during their time. And so the last time we did this, we really emphasized, and the way that you can influence the outcomes for these things is you want to give people the freedom to be able to work on anything they want. And I, for example, as a CEO, I make sure that I don't give people ideas, because this is the one time where you want the opposite to happen. So you actually don't want to do that. But the one way where you can influence things is, what are the awards, right? And so you create these award categories, and if you just make sure that all of them are AI based, then you know what's going to happen. But yeah, so we did these hackathons, and our hackathons are very largely focused on AI, because I really think that every company needs to reinvent themselves. And if you don't reinvent yourselves, it's basically over. And that stands for us at Fellow as well. So we did the hackathon, but I didn't think that was enough. So the other thing that we do, again, talking about the most powerful meeting for any company, which is the town hall, again, opportunity to be a cheerleader, get everybody aligned, but also set the stage for what's truly important. So we have a section in our town hall every single week, which is called AI presentations. And so this is an opportunity for anybody to come in and discuss something that they've been doing, either using ChatGPT or another tool or Copilot or whatever else people are using, in order to basically demonstrate and teach everybody else in the company what's going on. And so we highly encourage it. Everybody at our company can expense, like we give everybody an AI budget, and so they can expense AI tools because we want them to be more productive, more powerful, and we just need to give them room for experimentation. So I think the weekly presentation thing is really powerful because this other week we had one of our head of growth, and he came in and he did a presentation around, hey, I uploaded a bunch of spreadsheets, and using the advanced analysis mode on ChatGPT, I was able to do all these things. I could have done it myself, but it literally saved me 6 hours, and I can't believe that this is possible, right? But now everybody else sees that, and the opportunity is, hey, he had the analysis skills, but there's a lot of people on our team in different roles, they don't have that, but now it democratizes it and allows them to be able to have that kind of information. The other things that we think about, for example, are building personas. For example, in a marketing context, we work on building these large prompts that are collaborative within the company, that the more we learn about those specific company or these ICPs, what we'll do is we'll keep iterating on the context, right? And so then anybody who wants to do work on a particular ICP, the first thing they're going to do is go to our library. They're going to grab the collective knowledge of a whole bunch of information, plug that in, and then start working from that point and on. So the other way that we like to think about it is like, how can we all build on top of each other's knowledge and being able to use AI effectively? Yeah, it's really important. We're all learning. And the thing is that just encourage that creativity and then like constantly just have it every single week hammered in that we need to change. Otherwise, and we need to disrupt ourselves. So that's a lot of our company process. But of course, we think a lot about that within the product as well.
In terms of AI presentations, there's a lot of questions now. You talked about encouraging AI use and experimentation. You have AI budgets. But one of the things COOs and operations folks, we also have to think about the downstream effects and guarding our flank. A big concern is uploading and exposing proprietary and confidential information to these AI bots and training models, AI products and training models. How do you all approach that? Because now you just talked about your growth team uploading a bunch of spreadsheets, things of that nature. How do you balance that risk, but also how do you govern it?
Yeah, so these are really good questions. I think you have to have policies around it. So no identifiable information, it's like only aggregate anonymized information can ever be used. Yeah, basically nothing that is, personally identifiable, nothing that's like customer information. But those are things that today we enforce primarily through education and giving people the notion of what's possible and what's not possible. And then we have a channel in Slack we have a channel for AI and a channel for security. And we ever say, if in doubt, it's better to ask before you act. And so if it's a use case that you haven't thought about before and you're not sure, this is an opportunity to talk about it. That's how we approach it today. But again, we're talking about this stuff and it's one of those things when someone gets up and is going to do a presentation, we reiterate it again because we always have new people joining the company. So it's okay, just to repeat, disclaimer, this is what's possible, this is what's not possible. And I think that's just a better approach than a lot of this stuff, by the way, relates to general security practices, right? For example, we have all sorts of security practices. People we host a lot of very confidential information inside of Fellow. And so all this same kind of like training rigor that we put for people, our customer support teams accessing that kind of information, we just use the same training mechanisms to make sure that customer data is held in a responsible way. And again, anybody who's SOC 2 compliant, you just need processes in place and you just need that training. But my hope is that over the course of time, there's more tools that, just like all the stuff that we do on meetings that prevent you from doing bad things for meetings, I expect that these sorts of controls will continuously be built.
What are some of the notable AI presentations and use cases that come to mind?
Yeah, so the analysis stuff is very interesting. The other one, I remember we were doing one member of our marketing team. One of the things that we do is we produce a whole bunch of videos, and it's very hard to creating scripts takes a long time. But we have a whole bunch of really great content, right? And that we've written and blog posts and things. So one is, I remember a presentation where this person on our team literally produced 40 video scripts from content that we'd already created. And obviously you still edit it and you do stuff like that, but it's just like how much work is reduced. Or another one, I think you and I talked about this, which was for our podcast. So we run the Super Managers podcast. And one of the things for anybody who has a podcast is you want to create like these highlight clips. And so there's a manual way of doing it, but now there's a whole bunch of AI tools where you can say, grab the highlight, cut the segment, make it available. And what used to be a lot of work is now very specific. Another one that we used to do is for training purposes, right? And when you think about training, sometimes the way training happens is you talk about Darren, right? Darren in remote work. So one of the in the remote community, I'm sure you all have the same, which is when someone asks you a question, respond with a link, right? Put it in the wiki, grab the link, and then so that it doesn't get repeated. But sometimes a lot of information, it takes time to record it. So one of the things that we do, for example, is when we're recording internal conversations, what we might do is literally take the transcript and then feed it to ChatGPT and say, turn this into a wiki document in the form of documentation. And then you might, again, have to go and grab some screenshots and so on and so forth. But like a lot of the work is done. You just explain something to someone, but then you took the work that you had done and you turned it into documentation. Yeah, these are some of on the product side, we're doing some really cool, fun things, just like within Fellow itself. But in terms of processes that are not product specific, this is some of the stuff.
Everyone listening to this, if you can't tell, I'm a fan of Fellow. And one of the things that's great is we're always looking for ways to automate processes. We're always looking for shortcuts and ways to be more efficient. Just use Fellow, and it's just going to get better and better over time, it sounds like. You mentioned weekly all hands. That happens every week?
Yeah, we do it every week.
Oh, wow. And how long are those?
So they're 50 minutes. And that's another thing that we don't have 1 hour meetings. There's no 30-minute meetings. It's 25 minutes or 50 minutes. And all of our meetings start after the hour. So we do 10 past the hour and we do 5 past the hour. That's how we, and because again, by the way, like how do you do that? That short hack of 10 minutes less for your meetings, that's 16%, 17%, right? How do you reduce your meeting time by 17%? Is this one hack? But it doesn't work if you just shorten your calendar event, right? That's not how it works. What you actually need to do is you need to have a plan. And if you have a structured agenda that's very well prepared, you can actually do that and finish things in 50 minutes. But yeah, every week, 50 minutes.
The questions around this are just, all hands are actually a lot of work, right? These are really expensive meetings, and you want to make sure that it's the best use of everyone's time and that they should actually be there. To do that on a weekly cadence, 1, that's a lot of prep work. 2, is there that much new information every single week that needs to be conveyed in that setting?
Yeah, so great question. So not every meeting is an hour. So we've certainly had meetings that have ended in less time than that. We don't keep people if we don't need to. One of the things is that the end of a town hall meeting can also turn into a Q&A session. So we also use that opportunity. And the questions aren't necessarily for me. It could be for anybody in the company. But in terms of like the way that it's structured, we always have a section for a presentation. It could be like a product demo. It could be something someone else is presenting. But the way that it's not a lot of work is that every team, every department in the company has the ability to bubble something up to the town hall level. And it's just, we have a cadence where everybody bubbles up like the most important thing that needs to be mentioned or at a town hall setting. And so that's just like a process that kind of happens, and the most important things are bubbled up. And if there aren't super important things, then that section gets skipped. And so it's just like on a cadence where to some extent it's like this show that we produce every week. So we just have a process of like how to minimize the amount of effort that's required to get that there. But one of the things that I think is very important to me, I do a few things. One is we do this town hall. The other thing that I do is every week I send an email to the company. And this is something that I write on weekends usually because it's my creative brain space. But what it's really about is giving people the why. The best analogy that I've heard about in terms of what it's like to run a startup is that it's like you're driving this bus, you're sitting in the front row, you're the driver, and everybody else is in the back. They're doing things, they're building things. But the problem is this bus doesn't have windows, so they can't really look outside and see what's going on. But part of your job sitting in that front row is like to see what's coming, what you need to avoid, what the promised land looks like. And when you see the promised land, to be able to describe that. So this weekly email is about me describing what I'm seeing, but also explaining the why, right? So why are we doing things? So a lot of it will be like something happens in the town hall, and then I'll riff on that in the weekly email. Now, you heard this person say this about this customer, and here's why this is super important. Now, let me give you context. Because ultimately, if everybody had context and understood the why behind things, it's not about learning processes or following like a step-by-step procedure. It's like a higher order solution. And so that's what I do. So to me, like my town hall and my weekly email, like these things go really hand in hand. I think at the most basic level, when you think about company building, when you're one person, you have all the context, all the things. Every additional person you have, you're a little bit less efficient because not all the knowledge is centralized in this one place. Maybe AI changes that, right? And you can have you'll have one Tucows general AI, and I'll have one for fellow, and it'll have all the knowledge. But in the meantime, these are opportunities where we can like share context and just get everybody aligned. And so you just have to do this work to really empower everybody to function really optimally.
You mentioned Super Managers, your podcast. Got to talk about this. You've interviewed now close to 200 managers. You've had to learn a lot of stuff. Tell me about that. What are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned and taken into your day-to-day practices?
Yeah, so I'll mention two. So I'll mention my favorite one. One of the things that I've learned is the question that I ask everybody when they come on the show. The first question I ask is, what was a mistake that you started making when you first started to lead teams, right? And when you hear the answer to this question, like you said, 200 times, you start to see patterns. And what I realized, and again, this is what makes this stuff hard, right? So what I realized is that if you abstract this stuff out, you get to something what I call, which is the pendulum of management. And so the way that it works is you start managing, and the first thing that you do is you're managing from a place of wherever your context comes from. You start to think about, hey, when I first started, my manager, that one manager I disliked was such a micromanager. I just hated that. And I just wish that they would let me operate. And so you come in with that context. And so your first thing is, I'm going to be the opposite to that. I'm going to hire smart people and get out of the way. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do that to the extreme. And so you start to do that. And then before you know it, people are saying things like, I don't get enough direction. And then you swing the pendulum again. And then you swing it again, and eventually you arrive at this midpoint, and you're like, I get it now. I need to arrive at the midpoint. But then what you realize is that even that only works for some amount of time, because what it's actually about is that every single person on your team has a different pendulum. And not only that, but depending on what's going on, what role they're occupying, what's going on in the business, even that changes. So it's like this very dynamic thing. And so what you realize, and what makes management and leadership so hard, is it's an individualistic framework for each person on your team, but it also can change over the course of time. Something as basic as you need to have one-on-ones every week, but then over the course of time, you don't need to do that. Maybe once every 3 weeks is just fine. I feel like a lot of people take management constructs and say, these are the best practices, I shall do exactly that. But that's actually not true. I remember having Michael Watkins on the show. He wrote the book, The First 90 Days. And my favorite thing about that episode was He started talking about people think that management or even building businesses, any of this stuff has this instruction book, and people get religious about it and follow it to a T, but none of those things are absolute. And I said, what's an example of something that's not absolute? And he said, well, you should create a mission statement for your company and focus on values. And I said, what? That's not universally true? He said, no. What if you just got hired as a CEO and your job is to rejig the whole corporation and maybe you need to lay off 40% of the staff? Is that your number one priority, to sit around and do those sorts of things? That's a thing that maybe comes later. And so it just allows you to really question some of the things that are maybe everybody does and think about it more holistically. I'll mention one more since we're talking about it. One of my other favorite ones was we had John Fasoli. He was the chief product officer at MailChimp. And so one of the things that he was talking about is the difference between absolute and relative decisions. And I experienced this firsthand. I remember one time we sold our company to SurveyMonkey, and there was this decision that was made, and I didn't get it. But then there was this person that was trying to force us to do this thing or change our business in a certain way. And I was like, I don't understand, where's this coming from? I just can't logic it. And they're like, nope, it's been decided. It's an executive decision, and a bulldozer, without listening to reason, I'm going to plow this thing all the way to the end. And it wasn't until I talked to John that I really understood something at a very meta level, which was that when you make an absolute decision as an executive, that sounds like if I say, Michael, what should we do here? You just give me the answer. And you're like, we should focus on project X, right? But that's an absolute decision because there's no context around it. But if you say that we should focus 80% of our attention on project X and remember that there could be other priorities that arise in that 20% that may take precedence. So as long as these things are true, this should be the focus area of the company. And that's like a relative decision, and you're putting a little bit of context to it. It's not an absolute, we must, and ignore everything else and all reason and get tunnel vision. And as executive teams, the more relative decisions that we make, the more successful our company can be and how we can avoid disaster. So there's lots of little gems like this, Michael. And so one of my favorite things is that it's an opportunity for me to learn decision-making frameworks, different ways to think about things from some of the best people out there, which is, again, one of the things I'm sure you can relate. It's just these podcasts are so fun because you can learn. And again, we're all learning machines, right? At the end of the day.
That's 100% why I do this. That's it, right? I started this because I would have these conversations, and originally it was just COOs, and we'd think, oh, there really isn't much out there. We should put this out there. And then it was like, oh, cool. And then if I have a podcast, hey, more people will come and talk to me. So that's the entire thing behind this podcast, Between Two COOs. Time for the last question. We've all had those moments in a leadership position where we've just seen something completely off the wall, something new, something that surprises us, and we've thought, I never thought I'd see that. Do you have one of those that you can share?
Yeah, I'm going to share a fun one that's very recent. And so if you have ChatGPT on your phone, circa the last few weeks, depending on when this goes live, there's an opportunity. So there's a voice mode. If you haven't tried it, you can actually, there's this headphone icon, and when you press it, it turns into voice mode, and you can actually talk to it. And the interesting thing is, for the last week or so, every day after my drive home from the gym, in my car ride, all I'm doing is I'm talking to ChatGPT, voice native, and I'll give everybody a hack, because this took me a while to figure out myself. So the problem is, when you first start talking to it, it keeps interrupting you, because as you pause, it'll just start speaking and you're like, nah, I wasn't ready. Why are you interrupting me? So I figured out what you can do is you can say, I don't want you to say anything until I say the trigger word. I just use the trigger word Rolex because I'm like, I won't use that in conversation. And then this way it will only respond back and let you think. And so then what you can do is something really fun. So I'll give you an example. I was thinking about a PR strategy. I was reading this book, Ryan Holiday's Trust Me, I'm Lying. Fun book around PR and just understanding how the media works and all of this. And I was reading that book, and then I said, I wonder how I could use some of these strategies for Fellow. So I said to ChatGPT, hey, you're Ryan Holiday. You wrote this book. You're going to coach me. You're going to ask me questions. And you're only going to respond when I say Rolex. And then you can start talking to it, and it just becomes like this idea generating machine. It never gets tired. You can talk to it for as long as you want. And again, I find that this kind of active thinking is a lot of times more powerful than just like passively listening to any sort of material or article or things like that. And anyway, so I really enjoy that kind of conversation. And then the beautiful thing is now you can have, again, like different coaches. You can talk to Seth Godin, you can talk to Ryan, you can talk to all these people, continue conversations where you left off. And so every day just becomes like an active process of how can I improve any particular thing? And it's really awesome. So anyway, that's the surprising thing this is a thing that I'm actively doing now. I'm shocked as I say it, but this is where the world has come.
That's amazing. And everyone, next week on Between Two COOs, we'll have Seth Godin.
Oh, excellent. That'd be cool.
As a ChatGPT.
As an AI.
Yeah, exactly. Aydin, this is awesome. Thanks so much for joining me. Where can people go to keep up with you?
Yeah, I'm most active on LinkedIn. And of course, there's a Super Managers podcast, which people can find. And then also just the company URL is fellow.app.
Fantastic. There you have it. Thanks for listening to Between Two COOs. I'm your host, Michael Koenig, and a very special thank you to Aidan Mizrahi for joining us. Tune in next time for our next podcast episode on Between Two COOs, and be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you go for podcasts. And if you have a minute, give us a rating. So thanks for listening to this week's episode, and tune in next time. Until then, so long. Hey, it's Michael. If you've been on a Zoom with me lately, you'll notice that you have my full attention. It's because I'm not taking notes. Instead, I rely on Fellow, an AI meeting assistant, to take notes for me, along with tracking action items and decisions, handling recordings, transcripts, and summaries, all in one secure platform. It's kind of like magic. Built with security and privacy at its core, Fellow is the only AI meeting assistant that thousands of leaders and organizations trust to capture meeting notes and recordings while keeping your data safe. They're so confident that you'll love it, they're offering an insane deal to you all, Between Two COOs listeners. 90 days of unlimited AI-powered note-taking and recording completely free. Visit fellow.app/COO to sign up today and experience the AI meeting assistant trusted by leaders everywhere.